Hi, I'm Espen, and today I'm going to show you how the new structure feature of Sanity works. So the structure feature allows you to customize the way these navigation panes in the desk tool are rendered, what the different structure actually means. Currently, or in the old version, it's the document type, and then you choose one of the documents, and then you get an editor. But with structure, you can basically rearrange these any way you want and make arbitrary number of panes and all that kind of good stuff. So I have a basic Sanity project here, just like you would normally. Sorry, just clean up here. And to use the new structure feature, the first thing you'll want to do is to implement a part called Sanity Desk Tool structure, and point that to a file. I'll just put it at structure.js, but you can put it anywhere you want. Just make sure the path is matches it up, and that file has to export a function. For now, it'll just return null, but it should return a structure. So if I start the server now, if you already have the server running and do this, you might have to restart it for this first, when you first define this part, so it gets picked up. And once that's up and running, we can see that we'll get a structure error. So structure resolved to null, that's obviously not allowed. So we'll start by importing a structure builder, which will make it easier for us to build these things. You can import it as whatever, but I like to just refer to it as S to make it short and simple. And that's available in Sanity Desk Tool /structure. So you can return anything here, basically. You can return a list, you can return a document list, you can return an editor, and even you can start off by just rendering your own React component. But all of these things are built to a JSON structure through our structure builder. So we'll start by doing a list, and you can either give it a full spec here, which has you can see the properties that are required here is ID and a title, and that's basically it. I'll use the more the builder form of it, so you can do things like this: ID and then a title should be, let's say, just content, and then you can give it a number of list items. This is the basic form. This is the static list, which just has an array of different list menu items, but you can also use a document list for more dynamic, for something that actually returns a list of documents. We'll use that afterwards. So let's just save that and check out how it actually looks now. As you can see, it just has a totally empty pane. One thing that we can do is import all the default menu items, which is exposed as document type list items. And you have to splat that in here since it's in an array. So that returns an array, and we're already in an array. So as you can see, we already now have the same structure up and running, and we can start customizing it and doing cool things with it. So one of the first things that I want to show you that a lot of people have been requesting is something that many people refer to as singletons. In structure terms, it's basically just a list item representing a single document that you can place somewhere in your hierarchy. So I'm just gonna do document list item, and I'm going to give it a document ID here. So I'll find a person here, let's say Vin Diesel, and I'll copy that document ID. I'll also want to give it the schema type in question, so in this case a person. And I think that's all there is. So if I save that now, we'll see that I get Vin Diesel as a separate item here. But as you can see, it doesn't actually do anything when I click on it. That's because it doesn't have any child associated with it. So I'll start by doing that. So the child is sort of the next pane in the current navigation structure. So I'll want an editor here, and I will want it to have a you need to give it an ID, but it can be something just like editor, and you need to give it a document ID, obviously, which is the same person Vin Diesel. And you'll also want to give this a schema type as well. I think that should be all you need. Yeah, so now it's actually loaded this as a root level thing. You can still use the other things to have a more deep structure. So let's try that out. Let's try to make let's group this list of movies by decade, for instance. There's obviously, probably, most likely a better way to do this, but this is mostly just to show you guys how flexible you can do all of this. So let's say decades equals an array, and let's start at 1980, and then, well, that's lower than the current year, increment by 10, and then we'll push to this array a list item that has a ID. I'll just use the year here, and then I'll want to use the title. Could be something like it starts at I and goes to I plus 9. And then I'll want to provide the child here. And this is the interesting part. I'll create for the first time a document list. I'll also show you guys that the serializer, oh, I haven't actually used it anywhere. Decades. The serializer has what's hopefully pretty helpful errors, such as ID is required for document lists, and it'll also give you a path here. So you can see that it's at root here, and then a child which is called 1980, which is one we're iterating over here. And there's an unknown node below that which doesn't have an ID, so that's this child. So I'll do ID, and I'll give it decade I, and I'll give it a filter. And so this is basically a grok query, but it's just the filter part of it. There's no sorting involved in this particular parameter argument that I'm specifying here. It's just the actual filter. So for instance, type equals movie, and I want the what's that called, release date. I want the release date to be larger than or equal to, let's use some params here, the decade, and then, or maybe just call it start, and then the release date must be less than end. format this a bit. And we'll also want to provide the actual params here, of course. So start, and this will want ISO dates. So I think you should be able to do new date. And I think you should be able to do something as simple as this. And to ISO string. Do the same with new date I plus 10 to ISO string. Oops, and there they are. So you can see that they don't have the movie icon here. I'll probably want to help it a little bit along here by saying that these have a schema, they all have a schema type that's moving. And that will hint not only for display concerns, oops, that didn't work. Oh, that's a document list. I also want to provide it here. That not only helps the display, but it also helps behind the scenes to be able to do some cool stuff, some optimizations. So I didn't really want them here. I wanted it to be grouped by something. So let's make a list item as .list item. I'll use this form now just to show you guys that. You can also just say ID is by decade and the title is movies by decade and the items should be decades. So that's, oh, that's a list item. Okay, that's wrong. The child is a list containing those. S.list ID is movies by decade. Title is movies by decade. And of course, actually I don't, yeah, let's do that. And then items is decades. I think that should work. Boom. And you can see that it's now grouping all of these correctly. But they're sort of jump together a little bit. They're not sorted in a very meaningful way. So when I first filter by decade, I probably want to sort them by year as well. And you can do that by providing for the document list a default ordering. And that's actually an array of different ordering, since you can order by multiple fields. And you'll want to give that a field, which in this case I'll use the release date and the direction, which should be ascending. So now you can see that they're sorted. You can see that the document list, I didn't provide a child for that. That's because it has a default resolver, child resolver, which assumes that if you're showing a document, you'll probably want to use the editor. I think we might be able to provide the same experience, such as for the singleton here at some point, but we'll see. This is still in sort of earlier release. Yeah. And this item all the way down here, maybe we'll want to give that also a schema type. Movie. There's also an option for creating menu actions such as these. I'll make a separate video explaining how that works and how you define how those actions should actually happen. And there's also a way to provide a totally custom component, and I'll also show you that. But for now, thanks for listening and hope you enjoy the new structure feature.